Naoya Inoue has been getting a lot of heat over these darn hand wraps. And today I'm going to talk about faith-based arguments. If you're new to the channel, thank you for tuning in. I have a tendency, and I think it's a good tendency, to defer responsibility. Defer to experts. I look at Stitch as probably the best at hand wrapping. If he has an opinion on something, I'll factor that in as my own until I can reasonably understand what the situation is. Why might I do that? Because he's a hand wrapper. He's wrapped hands. He's fixed cuts. He's an expert. It's what we'd call an expert opinion. If this was court, that would be an expert witness. So recently, Naoya Inoue had to rewrap his hands. Picasso's team objected to the way his hands were wrapped. And it leads to what I will call the conspiracy culture on the internet, which is just, I mean, it's interesting, right? So the internet is interesting in the sense that now journalism, someone like myself who didn't take a traditional route to journalism, you can just be a fascinating person or be a boxing guy. Just a person in the gym can build a platform and really create a stronghold in the sport and kind of give opinions and self-distribute, and it can be out there and people can consume it and it can form their opinions around the sport. And that's really great. Now, the downside is what can garner a lot of views? Controversy, controversial topics, being disrespectful, chaos. All these things are going to get more views than things typically with substance unless you have heavy backing or you do it long enough or you've had a moment that went viral to some degree. And then you get large viewership, and then, people go, oh, it's that guy or whatever. It seems to be the modern formula. We're just chugging along like a tortoise, and maybe some of these views and videos will age like fine wine, but I really value the substance and my honest opinion over here. So I'm not going to lie just for viewership or anything like that. We just want to give you really good opinions for those people wanting boxing content. So what I'm noticing with Inoue is there are American fans who I feel they feel inconvenienced by the fact that his fights come on really early. And I see this a bit with Junto Nakatani too. I think that Inoue is finally now people, you can't really say he's not good. If you say he's not good, you're just kind of incompetent. I hate to say it like that, but every factor that we look at of elite boxing, he's past that threshold. So if you just don't see him as a good fighter, you're kind of a silly person because he's multi-division undisputed champion, been the man for like 11, 12 years now off the top of my head, 4-division title holder, just really, really great fighter, really great fighter. But I think there's some resistance with people going, okay, but what's going on there, right? Because my favorite fighter from my time zone doesn't get the same love and appreciation as Inoue. So whenever anything sparks up, people are going to run with it. And I call this faith-based arguments. So it's almost like religion, but it's with boxing, something they love, which is also in many ways like religion, right? It's something that you share and is sacred with a lot of people. And when you have a faith-based argument, it's very, very scary. And why is it scary, Lukie? Because there's no truth that can dissuade a faith-based argument. If I say I don't like Inoue and I think there's something suspicious, even if you're presented with proof and truth and anything else, you can simply say, I don't know. It's something that I've dealt with in some of my life where there's been faith-based arguments about me where people go, I don't like that guy. And I try to present everything about myself and they go, yeah, I just don't like you. I don't like you. And that was a big learning lesson. I remember Kareem Mayfield having to sit down with me, shout out my guy, Kareem Hard-Hitter Mayfield, and he goes, not everyone's going to like you. Because when I first came in the game, I wanted to appease everybody. I wanted to be liked. Because not everybody's going to like you. And there's a little bit of that, right? So no matter what anyone says, there's going to be a group of people that whether it benefits them to make content about Inoue and it gets people talking, or they just decide they don't like him and that they don't want to say that he's a good fighter. There's always going to be that, right? But I think the dangerous slope is we're in the just saying stuff era of the internet. And it's very tough, right? Because we want to contextualize a fighter like Inoue. And the contention that some are alleging is that he's stacking his wraps. And to be honest with you, I've watched a video with Stitch Duran. I'm unclear of the proper technique of stacking, and that's something that I have to go to an expert. But to watch Stitch say that simply this is not a big deal and that you need to be educated, I do need to be educated on this topic. So that's why I reference Cutman. That's why I'm looking for other people's opinions on this subject. What I will say is the notion of him and this happening, it would, like, this is where my mind goes. The level of incompetence for this to have happened just blows my mind from an administrative level. We'd have to have a level of, when he's a young fighter in Japan, incompetence. We'd have to have a level of an American incompetence in inspectors. The belief is just so phenomenal. And I think it stems from like the early people believing boxing is corrupt and that things don't work on the up and up. When I have the opposite perspective, yes, there's things that aren't great about boxing, but I think that those, especially the state athletic commissions in most places, especially the highly regarded ones like in the US and Japan, I think they try their best to really uphold a standard. And I think that you're not going to just see people not be able to hold high level accountability at that level. Like, I think that the idea that people could get away with this type of stuff over and over and over again, even though I don't even think that this is an issue based on what I've seen, from an administrative standpoint, the idea that someone could fight as many times as he did and that there is no issue with commissioners in dressing rooms, to me, speaks to a lack of knowledge of the process. I think it speaks to a fan's perspective of how fights work. That, you know, you go to this tunnel and you can maybe be sneaky and that things can happen, when really on fight night, you're walking in, you're very micromanaged. You have to check in a back. Let me give you a snippet of what it's like to be in the back. And it's not very fun. You enter a special way, you get your name checked off a list, you go back there. And once a fighter is there, there's an inspector. And then once the inspector is there, they're monitoring pretty much everything you're doing. To get your hand wraps, you have to make sure the inspector is present. The inspector watches you wrap their hands. There's also a member of the other team, depending on the level of fight. Inoue's been in championship fights for a long time. So for this also would say that the people watching his hands wrapped, which you'd assume would happen many other times, that they were unable to see this. So it's just, to me, it's fantastical thinking. And it speaks to, well, really a lack of knowledge of the behind the scenes, because there's so many administrative hurdles and there's so many things put in place so stuff like this doesn't happen. And I think fans are just unaware of that. And then at another level, I think that it speaks to a distrust in just how good Inoue is. Inoue's a special fighter, and I think because, you know, some fighters didn't get the same praise as Naoya Inoue, and I don't have to name fighters, but there's fighters across the board, and I think there are some fans that if anything comes up that's negative about Inoue, they might run with it because they're just distrustful of him. And look, that can happen, but that's also, I think people have louder opinions than they do in 2011 or 2012, because now these opinions can find themselves on Reddit or social media, and you can find like-minded people that can grow your opinions, and you can live in a world. And it's kind of, we've seen it in all walks of life, all the way to politics. But the negative to this, right? It used to be hard to find people that like boxing. Now it's easy to find people that like boxing, but now the goal is to try to find people that will have a mature and responsible conversation with you, which now seems to be the hardest part, because what boxing in the social media age has done is it's a lot of people who, to their core group of friends, are the boxing expert, going on the internet trying to talk and teach other people rather than having conversations and listening. I think we've done a good job on this channel crowdsourcing some of the best people to become our friends and families and contributors on this channel, but it can be a rough hang at times. So I think this whole hand wrap situation around Inoue is more so, it started with, I think, in the Fulton, when Fulton fought Inoue, there was something at the press conference with his trainer at the time saying something. There's just a level of discrediting in a way that I don't think we see with other high level fighters, if we're being honest. I think that there's a subsection of fans that just don't like Terrence Crawford because he was like a counterculture figure. He never wanted to play nice with the PBC, and he kind of was like a no nonsense, no thrills. I'm going to do it my way. And I think some fans will never like him just based on, kind of his mean demeanor. And I think Alexander Usyk is probably the most underrated fighter of this era, but I don't really ever hear people say anything bad about him. But Inoue is the great fighter of this era where you really see people kind of try to diminish and discredit his achievements, which I also think is why you've seen his fans oftentimes make arguments for, hey, he's boxer of the year, or hey, don't forget about Inoue, because he's oddly sometimes overrated and underrated, which makes him an interesting figure. He's one of the best boxers at timing people. He's also loading up on every shot and probably will get caught, probably in the Nakatani fight, if you're being honest. But those are my opinions. Let me know in the comments what you think.